Good evening, everybody. It is AlanBondar here, aka The Unraveler. Welcome to my channel for tonight's beginning of a debate between Michael Miano and myself. However, Michael hasn't shown up yet, so I don't know where he is. I have been trying to reach him, and I can't seem to reach him. So I don't know if this debate's going to take place, at least not tonight. So we're going to give it a few minutes, and I'm just going to ramble and see if he shows up. But anyway, yeah, tonight we were supposed to lay down kind of the debate of what we were going to talk about. We were going to catch up, discuss the rules, discuss what we want to say, kind of hear from each other, hear each other's sides, and then prep for a couple of weeks. Well, I guess about a week and a half, and then come back and have the debate. So that was the plan, and we'll see what happens. But anyhow, I apologize to you all that this is happening. I'm not sure what's going on. So, yeah, kind of bummed. So we're just going to look at me in my room for a few minutes. Yeah, let's go. I would love to. This would be great. We got Tristan in the room. Thanks for being here tonight, man. And Dr. McFarland Studios, great to have you. 1:1 made a comments this morning, and we appreciate that. I'll go ahead and pop that up here since we're just waiting for a few minutes. 1:1 said preterism needs to re-examine the book of Acts, not only on how people were born again, but on what the apostles taught about God and his Christ. And I would say preterism and all Christians need to re-examine the entire Bible, see if it actually has any warrant for belief that it is true. But we shall see if that actually goes anywhere. Dr. McFarland Studio said, recently unraveled and loved the content. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that very much. And thank you for being a part of this journey with me. Michael has shown up. Here we go. Michael, welcome to the Unraveler Show. You scared me. I didn't think you were going to show up.
No, I was going to show up. You work for the post office, so my wife works for the post office, and she just got home, and it's been a busy day. So, I apologize for that, but I had every intention of being here with you, and I look forward to our discussion.
Good. Well, it's good to have you here. I appreciate it. I was just shooting the breeze and just reading some comments. So we didn't miss too much. You're still here, and I appreciate that. Last time we saw each other, I believe we were giving a warm embrace at the How Shall We Now Live conference.
That was, I don't know if that was the last time. I think the last time was actually at Preterist Pilgrim Weekend.
Was it?
Yeah, when you spoke at Preterist Pilgrim Weekend, and I was there.
I did, yes. That was the last time I spoke at any conference. So if that's where we were, then you're right. That would be the last time.
That's right. Absolutely.
I don't have very much memory of that, unfortunately.
Fair enough.
But not because of you. I don't remember anything about that weekend. The whole thing's a blur. But anyhow, so be it. But that was the last time then. Okay, cool. And I am sure that we probably embraced as well on that weekend. I have no doubt. So here we are for the first time on opposite sides of each other. And I don't know that we've actually had a verbal dialogue since then, have we? Or at least since I left Christianity.
No, maybe some Facebook chatting back and forth.
A couple of private messages or whatever, but nothing serious, nothing deep. Just
substance. No, definitely.
So this is great. So I'm actually thrilled to be here with you. It brings back some very fond memories of us in Fort Myers. As we've advertised, I met you at Chick-fil-A. Well, right. It was technically in the mall, Edison Mall, but it was in front of Chick-fil-A, and I used to be a manager there. And why don't you tell that story so I can do I can stop talking for a minute.
Cool. Yeah, I'll jump in, and honestly, I share it probably once a week. So it's fresh in my mind and obviously very impactful. So, there I was at Chick-fil-A, and I might jog some of your thoughts as well. I was reading a book about relationships. I don't remember what book it was. It was a book about Christian marriage or something. And I went to the counter, and you were at the counter, and I had been there a couple times, and I used to go there and get the nuggets or whatever it was before work, and I worked in the mall. So you had commented on the book. You said something to the effect, what are you reading? And then it was, oh, I'm a pastor of a church. And you gave me the card. I think at that time it was Messiah Reformed Church, and told me to visit. And I took the card, and I think we had a great chat back and forth. And I know I was encouraged by that just quick encounter. And then you insisted on me visiting your church, right? I remember we texted a little bit, and you kept saying, or at least let's meet for coffee. And honestly, that was very encouraging to me because, I think most Christians miss out on the mentorship aspect of meeting with someone and talking regularly and getting to know each other. And in your persistence, you kind of spoke to me in that way. So when we met at Jersey Mike's, and I tell people this is the reason this is so important, because I tell people all the time, I'm like, Jersey Mike's is like my preterist hotspot. It's where you dropped it on me. So it's close to my heart. Obviously the prices say otherwise, but it was I remember meeting there, and obviously we got in on you talking to me about I had a rather strong perspective when I was a futurist. I was out there, talking to people at the bus stops, carrying my cross around town, and really pushing, that Jesus was coming. We need to get ready. And I've met with a lot of Christian preachers, and I, fell flat, where I was like, man, they either don't care, they don't know, they were all over the map. And you just were, kind of met me and matched me and obviously provoked me further, where you listened to me very graciously, which again is probably a big catalyst for me being willing to do this discussion and wanting to talk with you, because I remember you did exactly this, again, and this isn't me hearing your view, and I want to respond. I want to show substance, and I believe that's important here. But again, you spoke to me in such a gracious way and listened to me go on my whole ramble about, we need to be gathering goods for the end times. What are we doing? These Christian preachers are nuts, and obviously I remember you just listening and then turning it around, right? Like, well, what if I believe that, that it all happened already? And I had one other, mention of that. Another Baptist preacher had said to me once, what would you say to a preterist? And I was like, well, why would I entertain the conversation? That sounds nuts. Why would I do that? And then sure enough, there I was with you. And I left obviously thinking you were nuts, and, and did my homework, and, and I realized you were. And, so, and then honestly, the rest, obviously I emailed you back and forth. I did write a book where I included those emails. You were willing to let me share that with the world there, because that was such an impactful moment in my life. I lost an internship due to it. It kind of set me on a, look at me now, I'm considered a debater in the preterist community. I've had the privilege to defend what I see as the truth, contrary to some Facebook groups, apparently. But that really, Alan, you provoked me in such a great way, and you blessed my life. So, that's me, man. That's me meeting you. And that's a big part of me wanting to have this conversation with you tonight, is to really do an assessment, in my own world, of saying, where is Alan at? As you know, I've corresponded with you about your book. I look forward to reading that, engaging that. I've appreciated that Rick Welch has done some discussions with you. I look forward to further reviewing them. I think they're still going. I noticed something more recently. And yeah, so, I might say now I have to hand it back over to you so I could stop talking. But again, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share a bit. And hopefully I've set the stage of my mind and heart, and how I hope, our conversation will continue.
I imagine it will be a lot of good back and forth like this, where we allow each other to talk, as it was then. And that was one of the reasons why I was excited about this debate format that you had suggested, because I don't think we're going to need a moderator. I think we're going to be just fine interacting and being gentlemen with each other. We were then, and I think we will be now.
Sure.
So I'm thrilled about that. So, obviously my intent is to repeat what happened last time, except this time helping you cross the line into, into atheism. And I think that's just a logical result of not being a theist. You're either A or not A. There's no other option in between. You either believe in a God or you don't believe in a God. So those are that's the logical out. But yours would be the opposite. You would hope to, as you put it in one of your email Facebook posts today, to help me see the knowledge of God or understand the knowledge of God. And I, of course, have no knowledge of God. I would love to know why you think there is a God to begin with that we have knowledge of. So that's by and large what we're going to be discussing. And I love the idea of taking it more than just a 2-hour or 3-hour one-time debate, and then leaving it. This gives us time to ponder some of the things we're saying to each other, go back and think about that. And if I'm not mistaken, per our discussions, we're leaving open the possibility of extending it if we need to, if we feel like we should.
Sure.
And so if we get to that third debate day and we're like, yeah, we're going to need another one before closing thoughts or however many more, we can do that. I also want to leave open the possibility that we continue this privately after the 4 debate days, just because you know how it is. It can be very costly to lose your faith. So should that be the case, not saying it's going to be, obviously, but should there be any sort of direction there, I'm not going to press you online and be like, no, you admit it now. I fully understand what it would cost. So I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for honest dialogue so that the people who are watching can also see both sides of the issue and hopefully, as always, walk away friends regardless of the outcome. And I'm sure that you would feel the same about me confessing. But with any debate, it's rare, if ever, that the other side suddenly gives in publicly. So I want to open the invitation to continue this privately if we so feel like we want to do that. Does that seem fair?
I appreciate that. That's more than fair. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So tonight we were going to just discuss some topics, some things that we want to throw at each other that we want to go and prepare for. We're not going to be debating those tonight. Tonight's an opportunity for us to lay down what we're going to be discussing so that we have some time to prep. Is that the way you understood tonight?
Absolutely. Yes. Oftentimes I watch these debates happen and I often say to myself, I cringe and I say, I wish that man would have just went home and slept on it a bit. Just think about what you're saying, and I'm sure you've probably said the same, go home, sleep on it, think, don't have to have this quick-witted. Again, I'm not quick-witted. I'm also not bullish. I'm not a bully in any way, shape or form. God has not made me that way. And, that being said, I appreciate the opportunity to have a good dialogue back and forth. And I will say, 2 things I wanted to mark out. I've listened to you a bit, not as much as I'd like to, as I think I've already mentioned here. I'm going to go back and review the Deconversionist podcast. And I've listened to a couple. I will say, as I said to many people, Alan knows how the parallel accounts of the Gospels work. I don't understand what's happening here. So that may very well be something we could table for a debate. I thought that was an interesting discussion you had there on that program. And, I say that because I've followed your work and I haven't necessarily felt pushed, right? I listened to you talk about the Bible and I thought I agreed with you more, which tends to be the case. I agree with you more than I disagree with you in regards to the way that we would understand the Bible, even understand interpretation of the Bible. I think some folks have gotten themselves in quite a quandary, if you will, regarding the way that they interpret the Bible, and they box themselves in and they feel like they have to defend that box. I'm not one of those people. So I'm going to be fair, honest, transparent, where I don't have 100% of an answer or the best answer. I'll give you the best I can and I'll go home. And that's, again, to the ethos of what we're doing here. I'll sleep on it and I'll think about what I'm saying. I'll think about what you're saying. And I think that is God honoring in my approach. And that's honoring of your audience, of the people, we're using your YouTube channel. And I believe it's important to honor people's time, wherever they are in their understanding. And the other thing I'll just mention here would be, contrary to what I see a lot of social media folks saying, I believe what I believe, you see? So I don't have this problem where I have to fear that I have to do a private conversation with you, or I have to box you into an idea that we have to debate. Let's talk and let's put these things on the table and let's help people. Again, you've posited, and many times I've listened to your discussions, that this is your effort of helping people. I think you know about me, and hopefully folks that are viewing this know, that's my mentality. I want to help people. I want to help people think. I want to help people understand what they believe, whether they believe Islam, whether they believe Christianity. I want to help people think through the things that they believe. And I've gained that idea from you as well. So I look forward to this, and I think you've been more than fair in our dialogue. I want to make that apparent here. This isn't, nobody here has bullied each other, except for maybe the Facebook post from the very beginning where it was, is Mike Miano scared? I said, well, no, busy, it's not scared, you know. And again, that is my mind and heart is to want to respond to that and give us the time to have this conversation. So.
Right on. Mike, I forgot my pen and pad upstairs. I'm going to run and get it really quick. Can you fill the time for just a moment? Just tell people how you became a Christian so that they have an idea of that.
Great. That's perfect.
And I'll be right back.
Thank you. Yes, I'll fill some time. Again, I appreciate those of you that are tuned in here, and the opportunity to be here with Alan is more than a blessing. And I explain this, by the way. I have a book called Freaked Out by the New Covenant, where I share a bit of my journey. Not all of the details, of course, but a bit of the journey. And while I was in prison, I came from, a household where I would say that my family members were nominal Christians. So I've heard of Jesus. I've gone to church. I've attended Catholic church. I've attended a non-denominational, maybe Pentecostal church. Had a very weak understanding of what it meant for Jesus to die for the sins of his people. And wasn't necessarily open to that idea by the time I found myself in prison at 19 years old, and a 19-year-old that knew it all. And, I went through my 3-year prison sentence. About 2 years in, I was reached out to by a couple Christians in the prison system. It's amazing how folks are very evangelistic in the prison system with various religions. Anyway, people had reached out to me. I attended mass for a while to find peace, not understanding a thing, and not feeling compelled in any way either, up until I met a Christian who I asked how I could go to Protestant services, and he decided to invite me to study a bit with him, namely regarding politics, as that was something I was very interested in at that time, how, the world worked, if you will. So he gave me some books. Some might refer to them as conspiracy theory books that, used the faith, the Christian understanding, and maybe some of the secret societies. And this, challenged me a bit. Now, this is on the heels of me doing some research into Islam, reading the Zohar, the Kabbalah, the Jewish mysticism there, not understanding a thing, reading about the various mythologies and understandings, really trying to go on a journey of understanding. And I came out, again, a know-it-all. Now I'm, 21-year-old know-it-all. And again, so now I'm 22 years old. I'm still in prison. I meet this man named Paul, ironically enough, and he studied with me, and he would always tell me that the Bible was spiritually discerned, 1 Corinthians chapter 2. He would lean on that heavily, and that I needed to have a spiritual mind to understand these things. And I believe that to this day, just might not believe it the same way. All in all, he put the historical story of the resurrection in front of me with the challenge to read Lee Strobel's book, The Case for Christ. And I came out of that rather convinced regarding the historicity of the resurrection of Jesus. And I could say that's what tugged my heart. And that's where I eventually, internally, I guess you would say, in the inner man, came to the knowledge of God and said, I confess that I believe that Jesus is Lord and Savior. And been running with Jesus, if you'd say it that way, for since that time in 2005 in the prison yard at Auburn Correctional Facility.
Fantastic, man. Thanks for doing that. Thanks for giving me the minute to do that. I just want to make sure that I'm writing ideas down so as we talk, I can prep for this.
If I may say, if you can see if people are still tuned in, you might want to do like a wake up sound. I might have led some people to fall asleep at this point. You might want to make sure you still have your audience, but thank you for the opportunity again.
That's all right. That's all right, because if they didn't fall asleep, you might have led them to Christ, and we don't want that here. So. All right. So Strobel's book had an impact on your life. One of the things I think we'll touch on in our debate is why it convinced you. Essentially, the apologetic arguments, why that's convincing to you. Maybe more precisely, rather than why it convinced you, but more so why it continues to convince you, or why it convinces you today. Is more where I'm looking at, because so from my perspective, I don't think anybody gets logicized into Christianity, and we'll talk about that in our discussion as well, or you can pick my brain on that if you have some more thoughts or questions on what you want me to talk about with that. But I think faith alone is the method by which people are saved, and that they do come to the knowledge of God. I don't think it's through evidence. And I think that the evidence comes in retrospect for those who already have faith, and then they are looking for evidence to substantiate the faith that they already have. And I think that's what apologetics does. So, so I'm going to press you during our debate on the fact that it wasn't at all Strobel's book or apologetics that convinced you to get in. You already had faith. That was sort of maybe the drawing card or the tipping point that woke up your faith that you had all along, so to speak. I think that our environment that we grew up in, whatever reason, we grew up in a country where God is just prevalent. I mean, even the president's always a Christian. It seems to not matter. He's always believing in God, or she's always believing in God, as it may be when we get one. But so I think that everybody tends to have this innate idea that a God exists, and they just come to accept that as normative and never really question it. And so that's already kind of built into us from youth. And I think that when we go through times of trial or trouble or tension, those moments make us desperate, if you will, or needy or desirous of something to satisfy the emptiness that we're feeling or the trouble that we're feeling. And the natural inclination is this God that we already believe exists. So that's one of the areas that I'm going to press, is the idea that faith is the true reason you believed, and that evidence or apologetics or whatever you think you have there is just what substantiates the faith you already had. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I would agree with you. I think, I think of Hebrews chapter 11, right, where it says that faith is the evidence of the things not seen. It is the substance of things hoped for. Absolutely. And, I might say where I would want to press you, I'm not a pushy person. And I think my sovereign grace views, which may come out in this, probably put me in a position where I'm not very pushy, because I do leave it all up to God in that respect. But when I think of, faith is the evidence of things not seen. So then I think about you, and I pray for you, of course, in that regard. And I say, well, then how would Alan replace that? So if it's faith is the evidence of things not seen, would it be appropriate to say that materialism is the evidence of things not seen, or the evidence of things, in other words, that unseen things don't exist, right? Is that what I guess you're positing? That because of your view that God doesn't exist, therefore there are no unseen things, and that is the right way to think.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say that. As a practical or a functional naturalist, I would simply say that there are things that you can't see that I still think exist, like laws, for example, wind, things of that sort. Things you don't see with your eyes, but you can see the evidence of them. You can test them. You can observe them. And I know that the natural response to that from the Christian is, see, look, you can see the evidence of God. And that's one of the arguments that we'll definitely touch on and deal with. But I wouldn't make a case that nothing unseen exists, but I would make the case that taking things on faith when you don't have evidence, sufficient evidence, justification to believe in that thing, that's when it becomes unwarranted. So I don't believe there is sufficient warrant or justification to conclude that something supernatural exists, any more than I think there's any justification to conclude that unicorns exist, or pixie fairies, or Gurings, which is a creature my stepson invented, and I love it. I'm like, I'm going to use that in my book. It's so good, Gurings. So there are things that you don't believe exist. And you don't try to say, well, yeah, but just because you can't see them doesn't mean they don't. Well, of course that's the case, because just because you can't see them doesn't mean they don't. Unicorns might exist. We really don't know. Leprechauns might exist. I have no way of knowing, because it's unfalsifiable, right? So I don't use faith to draw a conclusion and say, hey, just because I don't see them, I'm just going to decide they exist. Because I see rainbows and leprechauns make rainbows. Leprechauns must exist because I see evidence. That's not a good way to draw conclusions. But I think that's what faith does, and I think that's what it does with God. It looks around and it makes some assertions, and it looks at evidence like rainbows, and it says, God must be the designer or the creator. And that's what I would take issue with. And that's where we're going to have a big discussion, I think, during our debate on faith itself and what the nature of it is and how it works and how evidence relates to it.
So, I want to say, I got a couple things I want to say in the mix of that, a couple questions, if you don't mind. But first, I just wanted to say that a big part of tonight, you might say this is kind of a fanboy thing for me, because I appreciate you, Alan. I look forward to discussion with you. I really wanted to just get it here and be willing to chat and have a conversation. However, the other flip side of that is I'm hoping tonight we might nail down what exactly we're going to debate. Because my issue, again, and this is where I guess the first question I wanted to ask you is, do you feel inclined and kind of led to debate those people that might believe unicorns exist?
No, and because there aren't very many, and they aren't going around telling me how I need to live my life, and they aren't in the government trying to dictate laws and policies that are religious based, and they aren't sitting around being opposed to people who have human rights to be transsexual if they want to, without commenting on how evil that is in the sight of God. So that's why Christianity is something that I take deep issue with and feel the need to contend against, and also how it degrades people and makes it so that your value is never found in yourself, but always in some other person named Jesus. You have no value in yourself. And I think that's degrading. And I've come to, and when I left Christianity, I had to go through severe therapy just to find who I was as a person, because as a Christian, I literally lived with that mindset. And I know you do too, because that's the Christian message, at least the Reformed message. And you and I are in the same camp with that. It's that we are worthless worms, worthy of nothing. Without Jesus, we literally are just like the worst of the worst scum of the earth. Might as well just call me Hitler. So when you take that Jesus away, all of a sudden, imagine what happens to a person who's been degraded to think they're worthless and nothing. If they don't have that person to put their value in, holy crap, So I think it does a great disservice and evil to individuals by degrading them like that and making their value in somebody else instead of themselves. So yeah, those are the reasons why I don't go around trying to debate people who happen to, a random case that happens to think in unicorns. They don't really affect my life. They don't affect the life of those around me. Christianity does.
I appreciate that. And again, I'm sorry to hear, as we know, the all too common, I love Jesus, but I hate the church, man. And these folks, I get it. I'm as most likely as much against you. I find maybe we're debating the wrong stuff and the wrong people, because again, I detest Christian nationalism. I detest what this country and what the West has done with this historic ancient faith. Actually, as I say that reminds me of another question. I wanted to ask you, do you believe that Christianity is an ancient faith, that Judaism is an ancient faith?
Yeah, ancient, sure.
Okay, like obviously 2,000 years old, right? We would say Christianity at least traces back 2,000 years.
Yeah.
Century.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, all right. I listened to, the reason I ask you that is I listened to when you talked about the Bible. You said that the Bible's no different than other ancient religions, and I said, well, okay, so then that's something I could track with, right? That there's no that there's other ancient religions that believed a whole bunch of things, and there's Christians and Jews and et cetera. So thank you. I want to say this at the outset here because I think I've already made some points, but I want to let folks know that I have a lot of questions, not so many answers. I think that's why I am the person I am, and that's where I've been led to the view that I have, is because I've always been willing to ask questions and know that I've been wrong time and time again. In my journey, I've been wrong, and I've been a seeker. I've been someone who has. Now, I agree with you, Alan, that in my faith, if you listen to, I don't know, you had just left when I started, so I shared that in my life, my family were nominal Catholics. So, and I say that lightly because there are some serious devout Catholics, and some of them have become devout Catholics. But in my younger years, at least it seemed like, these folks aren't taking this serious. And that really didn't lead me to have an appreciation for Catholicism early on. And that is I'll carry that, and I'll admit that that's a part of my paradigm toward Catholicism, even to this day, because of the way that, these folks lived. And, so because I've had that battle with some Catholics where they're like, that's because of the way you grew up. That's why you don't have an appreciation for the Catholic Church. Again, another debate for another time. So that being said, I do want to let folks know that while I plan to bring forth substance, I will do the work. I will think with you. I will research. However, I'm very much willing to know I don't know it all. I'm very much willing to admit that to people. And I do believe in a variety of interpretation in the Christian community. I wish folks would understand that conformity doesn't mean unity. That, you know, I wish we could see a healthier ethos come forth from the Christian church. I lament, you know, folks that, you know, that have done many of the things you listed there, Alan. I lament that. So I just wanted to say this, if I may, at the outset here, before I ramble, would be that, you know, I do believe in sovereign grace. I do believe that God has to open the eyes of the heart, eyes of the mind, you know, eyes of the being, if you will, the innermost being of a person, in order for them to believe, in order for them to have faith. Maybe not believe, because even the demons and then the devil shudder and believe. However, to have faith and to truly walk in these things, to have a faith with works, I believe is a work of God. So I don't believe that I'm going to lead Alan to that. I believe that I'm going to demonstrate that, because I hope to be a person who lives my faith coupled with works that, you know, that can be seen and that can be shown. Because I agree with you that there's far too many that have done the opposite. There's far too many that have seek to be know-it-alls even to this day, rather than listen and learn. So my hope is to learn some things and to challenge myself a bit here. But I want to mention that I don't believe it's up to me. I don't believe it's up to Alan to become a believer in Jesus Christ, a follower of Jesus. And that's not my intention here, you know, to make you a believer. My intention is to respond to the call to say that there are Christians out there that are seeking, searching, studying, and proving the things of God, and are willing to have a conversation, even if we leave the conversation, which more Christians should be comfortable with doing, saying, well, I put my best foot forward and I responded to the things that I believe need to be responded to. And I believe I've seen some of that here on your, you know, with the deconversionists. I listened to a gentleman earlier talk about the faith, and I thought there are some that are responding to the call. So I just wanted to make that known at the outset here that, you know, faith is the evidence of things not seen. And in my perspective, you know, another thing, Alan, actually, before I ramble, and I want to ask you one more question, and then I will gladly pass the mic over to you to see if you have anything to provoke in this. And let's start nailing down some details. I'm taking notes, even if we don't nail them down live, right? I think we can communicate for the next week or so and say, this is what we'll put on the table for substance. But what I want to ask you, in light of what I mentioned before about Hebrews 11, where, you know, it talks about faith being the evidence of things not seen. So obviously, you know, I thought you responded well to that, you know, we shouldn't just have faith and believe in unseen things because, well, that, you know, as many would assert, Deuteronomy 29:29, right? The mysterious things belong to the Lord. But what I want to ask you is, on the flip side of that, what would you say is your hope, right? Because if faith is the evidence of things unseen and the, you know, substance of things hoped for, how would you say you have hope? And again, I ask that because I'm wanting to know, well, it sounds like I'm being led toward materialism, but then what's my hope if I'm a materialist?
So first of all, I'm not a materialist.
Okay.
I'm a naturalist, and I prefer to call myself a functional naturalist, simply because I think people tend to conclude that once you say you're a naturalist, you're just settled and unwilling to consider anything that's not natural. And I'm not there. I'm a functional naturalist because currently I have no other option. I don't believe a supernatural exists, so I live my life as though the natural is all there is, until I see good reason to believe the supernatural, and then, you know, and then I'll open the possibilities up on how to go ahead and live out of that as well. But to answer your question about hope, not to sound snarky, but genuinely, I mean, what I would say is I hope in things in the real world. Like, I hope, you know, Ray and I are talking about going on an awesome vacation this year. I hope that comes true, and I hope that we can do that because, man, I need it. I hope that we have a child. We're hoping for that to happen. I'm hoping that our kids, you know, grow up really well and do well in society. I'm hoping that at the end of this debate, you become an atheist. You know, I hope for a lot of things. I just don't maintain a hope for something that is not based in reality, thus making it a false hope. I see no need to hope for things that you can't actually root in reality. So I tend to hope for things that are realistic, even if that means they're not likely. That's entirely different. But currently, since I see no evidence or reason to believe in the supernatural or an afterlife or a soul or any of these things, for me to hope for them would be a waste of mind space. So, you know, whether or not there is such a thing as hope that the believer thinks they have, you know, and and thinks that that's a substantial way to live. If there isn't an afterlife, what difference would it make then? Like, we would simply have to deal with that reality. There's no point pretending like something exists that doesn't. So, the first thing that and that's one of the most common questions or comments you get from Christians. Well, you have no hope. I mean, like I just said, I have hope in a lot of things, but do I maintain a hope in an afterlife? I mean, would I say that that I think it would be really cool if I was surprised? Yeah, I would love to be surprised and there be an afterlife. That'd be dope. But I think you'd be just as surprised because I think you're guessing. I don't think you have any real substance to believe in one. So I think it's just all rooted in faith. So I don't think either of us has that genuine hope. I think we're both just saying, hey, how cool would that be? You call it hope. I say, I mean, that's not something I would genuinely hope for. Maybe in a loose sense, I can call it hope, but I try to root my hope in things that are real. So, I don't have a hope that Santa Claus is going to come down my chimney. I just don't really think that's going to happen. But I might hope for a horse. Do I think that's likely? Probably not. But how cool would that be?
A horse to come down your chimney?
What's that?
I said a horse to come down the chimney?
No, Santa come down. But now that would be dope. That would be, if I was hoping for that, yeah, that'd be dope. But anyway, so all right. So I would just like to say right out the gate that the primary topic that I would like to debate or discuss, maybe we just use the word discuss. I might throw out the word debate periodically just because it's a term, but what we're going to discuss is the existence of God. I would just like that to be our primary topic. You believe there is a God, and you don't just hold that loosely as if it's a possibility. You are definitive. You are dogmatic. You know that you know that you know that you know that God exists, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm like, how do you know that? I would really like answers to that. That would be the primary thing I would like to discuss, because the thing that frustrates me that I get all the time from Christians when I have this debate is they try to flip the burden of proof and say, oh, you're saying there's no God. Prove that's the case, because I don't have to prove there is a God. You have to prove that. And the difference is, no, I don't. And here's why. I'm not declaring there is no God. I'm simply saying I have no reason to believe there is. I haven't seen sufficient reason, sufficient justification or evidence to acknowledge that fact. You, on the other hand, as a Christian, are making such a declarative statement that you know for certain. It's amazing to me that somebody who says they know something with absolute certainty they have no way to actually demonstrate that, other than saying, well, you prove he doesn't. That's not a demonstration. That's just nothing but frustration to me, because you're turning the burden of proof. So I also, when I hold to things in the real, I happen to be a maximalist. Like I can only say that I know things maximally. I don't know anything for certain. I don't think we can know anything we can't even really know for certain that we're not just brains in a vat, So I hold everything that I believe loosely. And I have no reason to believe we're just brains in a vat based on the things around us and the nature we live in. So I don't live my life as though that's the case. But I hold everything that I believe loosely. And I did this as a Christian too, which is why I think I got fortunate. It ended up exiting, because I used to hold fluid dogma. I don't know if you ever remember me teaching about that, but I've been teaching about that for years. And I used to tell my congregation, we all have dogmatic beliefs. We all have things that we think are true, and we're naturally going to hold them strongly because we believe them. But you got to have fluidity with that, so that when new information presents itself, you have to allow that dogma to release so that you can incorporate that new information and reevaluate what you believe in light of the new information. And so I think with fluid dogma, it allows me to constantly be open-minded and changing and welcoming information that may otherwise I would have missed if I was just so dogmatic that I knew with certainty. I think you're a skeptic like me. I think you like to challenge yourself. You like to grow. I've seen you do it. You went even further than I did. I started as a conservative dispensationalist. You were the carry your cross on the street and whip yourself in the back dispensationalist. It was nuts, man. I was just like, what is this guy? So it was a lot of fun to watch you. So you've come a long way to where you are today. I have no doubt that you have an open mind and are willing to change. The problem is, if you are so dogmatic that you know for certain that God exists, one of two things has to happen. One, you either need to say, you know what, I actually don't know with certainty. I can only hold this loosely. Or you have to provide the definitive evidence to justify that certainty.
I appreciate that. Yes, and I think that'll be a good debate with of course the intro point there that I believe that God has to open the eyes of your heart. So I don't know, and this there's going to be I got a couple things I want to say to that. I want to double back to something you said on social media. If you remember, we were interacting and you said to prove the existence of the spirit, right? So obviously, that brings me to this place where my natural response is going to be, how would you like me to prove it, right? But before I ask you to answer that, right, how would you like me to prove the existence of God other than a life well lived? Falling, getting up, getting smacked in the face, getting pushed back, keeping at it, and knowing in my mind and heart. And I don't want to go too far ahead. I have another point I would love to make with that. But before I get there, I want to say this. I do believe that God has to open the eyes of your heart. Obviously, we know that in Hebrews 11, I guess that's my text I'm hunkering down on this evening, would be in Hebrews 11, it talks about that, the one who has faith must believe that God is, right? And that God is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. I believe that. That's where I believe faith. I believe faith that has to, make that known. But again, I admit that my paradigm was, I was shaped by the Western culture. I was shaped by a nominal Catholic understanding. I'm going to be kinder this evening. A Catholic understanding, and I've never didn't believe that God existed. Never in my life. I think I had like a very brief moment in the box. The box will do that to you in solitary confinement, where you start to hunker down. You're like, man, God, well, hello, what is happening? Or the gods. I was even open at that point, probably calling on. I was willing to call on Baal if somebody would answer. I've never had that moment. Now I'll mention another book. Mentioning these books probably putting my foot in my mouth, because these men would have me burned at the stake. Conversation for another time. But I mentioned Lee Strobel already. I might mention Ray Comfort. Ray Comfort has a book, right? And I'm sure you've heard of it. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. Because for me, and that speaks to me, because meanwhile, Ray Comfort might not speak to me. The book title speaks to me because when I see a painting, I know there's a painter. When, and that's kind of my basic understanding of God, is that when I've naturally assumed there's a God or gods. I was even open to that in my life, where I was like, all right, well, if the gods can make their case in my very rudimentary understanding, I'm willing to admit that the man that did an investigative journey of all faiths while I was in prison, today my journey would be quite a bit different, and I know you appreciate that as well. And you've been more impactful than you realize, and maybe even I realized, because I believe in fluid dogma to this day. I still do, and that's probably, I'll flip what you said. That's probably what's kept me in the faith, is being willing to be reasonable and know that well, them folks, they got a lot right, but a lot wrong. So that's what keeps me there. And then I mentioned, and I want to say this also. As I mentioned, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, and I think I'm giving you some good things to respond to here. I want to say that atheism, and I want to know if you agree with this, and this, I guess, is where I'll land. So I'm going to ask you three questions, of course, would be, number one, how do I prove this, right? What would you say is a way to go about? Because again, obviously I'm going to flip that coin and say, how are you going to prove me wrong? If I tell you I know somebody, you say he doesn't exist. Well, and we could do that. I could do that dialogue with you as well. But I guess that's the number one thing, is how do I prove this? Number two would be, how would you respond to something to the effect that, well, yeah, there's a world, right? Hello, how did it get here? And I do believe that's a basis for, and that's where I'll land here. This third question would be, do you agree that atheism is sort of the new kid on the block, with the fact that ancient societies believed in gods? They believed that this all came from somewhere, with really crazy stories, granted, but they all believed that, and they landed somewhere with there either being God or gods. I don't know that atheism has been around throughout time, and why is that?
All right. So I'll go backwards first. I want to be careful not to spend too much time responding to all the questions tonight, because that's not the point of the night. Because then we came prepared to more so discuss the topics.
That's right.
But I'll respond as quickly as I can without going too deep. And I don't necessarily need a response from you to demonstrate that I'm wrong or that I'm right. because we're going to have plenty of time to do that. But you asked these questions, so I'll be glad to do it because it might help you with your prep or whatever. History of atheism. I suppose my answer to that would simply be that you can't disassociate the history of religion and why people believed in gods from the advancements of science. Prior to the advancements of science and technology that we have today, it seems reasonable that the best conclusion to why lightning would happen was there's a god up there throwing lightning across the sky. So I don't knock people in history for drawing those conclusions, because when you're only dealing in philosophy and you don't have scientific evidence, it's easy to draw those kinds of conclusions. And when you have such a long period of time where that's the main held belief, it really roots itself in society. So it's been incredibly difficult for the scientific advancements to alter the thinking of those who already have faith, because you're naturally inclined to hold on to things that you already believe. So that would be my quick answer to that. And I don't think there's any good way to go back into history one way or another and say, hey, there were no atheists. Well, we don't know. I mean, I guess functionally, I would say there were atheists. Everybody was an atheist until the first person came along and said, hey, that's a god. And then you suddenly had a theist. So I would say that whoever was that first person would have been the person that said, hey, philosophically, this makes sense. And they might have even had all these design arguments and all this, and it made sense to them at the time. Now we have really good scientific advances that make far more sense of where the world came from, or at least how it began in the beginning of the time where time started and stuff like that. So anyway, that would be my quick answer to that. As far as the design, how did the world get here? That kind of ties to what I was just talking about. So my answer to that is just going to be simple, and you can go and take some time to think about this as well. But my answer to that is there is enough reason and logic to say, hey, nothing comes from nothing. And you say, okay, yeah, well, the world didn't just make itself. Where did it come from? And I'm cool with that to a certain point. And here's that point. We know nothing prior to Planck time. We have no way to evaluate it. We have no way to diagnose it. We don't have a tool yet to go back beyond the 8 billion years that we have to go back to when we see time began. Planck time that's as far back as we can go. So sure, it's easy to say, well, see, you don't know what happened prior to Planck time. It must be a creator God. And I'm saying, how do you know? We can't possibly know anything prior to Planck time. It could have been a creator unicorn. It literally could. I mean, it could have been my cat. My cat thinks it's God. Walks around a house thinking it created this world. So maybe it was my cat, and he just decided to be my cat because he loves me that much. Or it could have been another form of nothing that we don't understand because it's not the nothing of this world. We can only live and make sense of things within the parameters of the universe in which we live. So when we logicize now and we think things rationally, we can only do that in this universe because these are the laws of logic we have to work with. But you can't apply these laws of logic to anything prior to Planck time because we know nothing about the laws of logic, or even if there are any prior to Planck time. In fact, that's how you guys define your God. He's outside space and time. How did you come up with that? Because whatever existed prior to space and time must have existed outside of space and time, whatever that means. And I'm saying, okay, I can go with something else has to start all this, but why God? That's just a random God of the gaps leap, in my opinion. Mike, I think I lost you. Are you still there?
I'm still here.
Okay, sorry, you're blanking out a little bit, so wanted to make sure I didn't lose you. So that would be my quick answer to that. And also, there are models, scientific models, that show that this could have begun by an eternal universe that just continues to create multiverses and just continues to do this forever and ever. There's also models that say that energy evolved from eternity and created this universe, but energy existed in a different form prior to this universe. In fact, the universe itself could have existed in a different form prior to this universe. In fact, if you think about it, I think it was Aquinas himself. I think it was Aquinas, if I'm not mistaken. I might be getting the wrong guy. That actually argued that we have no way to demonstrate that it wasn't just a universe that existed forever. So my ultimate answer to that is, sure, it might be God, but how did you draw that conclusion? I'm simply saying, I don't know. And I'm okay with I don't know. I'm not okay with making a claim and drawing a conclusion without warrant or justification, because that's what gets us in trouble. You start believing and you start declaring, that it's this God, and you actually don't. So that would be my answer to that. And ultimately, you asked me how would you demonstrate that God exists, particularly in light of your view that you can't actually convince anybody that it has to be God. And my first answer to that would be like, well, what convinced you? Because whatever convinced you would convince me, I would think. So I would like to know what convinced you. And if God has to do the convincing, my question would be, why won't he convince me? If I have to sit here and wait for God to convince me, I literally have no hope then, this hope you're talking about, because it's not up to me. I sit here and just wait and twiddle my thumbs until God decides to do something. There's got to be some way for me to evaluate the existence of God and test it to know if he even exists to begin with. In my mind, I see no reason or justification to believe in something that you cannot test for yourself and have evidence exists. Because if you do, you're literally just guessing. If I can't test it, there's no way I can know for sure. I can have hypotheses, but until I can test it, how can I know? And to date, we just don't have a method that we can reliably find the supernatural. There's no way that we can do that based upon the resources available to us. The only method I've heard that does this is faith. And my question about faith is, how do you know what your faith is? How do you know what you're believing is true? Like, is there anything that can't be taken on faith?
Yes. Is there anything that can't be taken on faith? Sure. Now, again, I don't know that I live a life that I've told people just have faith that it all works this way. I think that we should be testing things. That's a scriptural admonition, right? To search all things, examine everything carefully, or prove all things, depending on what translation you're reading there. 1 Thessalonians 5. So I believe in that ethos. I believe I have it literally written on the wall in my office: seek, search, study, and prove. So I would imagine, I hope that I live with that. I think there's a lot of things that can't be just lived off of faith. Now, I think what happens here is there is a misunderstanding. And again, I want to just remind you of something I said earlier. You know this, and I know that you know a lot of these answers because you're a wise man. That, my response is going to be that we need to search these things out. There's going to be things that we can't. I lost my frame of thought because I want to just remind you that you know this. You know a lot of the answers that I'm going to have. There's things that I'm not going to be able to prove. Let me double back to my thought here. Seek, search, study, and prove. I'll just say this, because these are some of my notes that I have. I have very, very little notes that I wanted to bring tonight. For me, to respond to your question there about how do I prove that God exists and why do I would say that there must be something wrong with me then, because for me, when I went on this journey and I began to try to learn about God and try to find if there is something going on with God, then I need to learn more. And I began to learn more, and I began to have and we'll call it a feeling. I'm comfortable with that. I had a feeling in my mind and in my heart, and yes, my literal heart too, by the way. My chest, at least where I think my heart is. That there was something bigger than my life. And now, if I may, actually, I have to respond to something else. My hope is not that I'm going to die and go to heaven. That is not my hope. That is not the actual historic hope of the church. The historic hope of the church is that there are people of God that live out the will of God. That is our hope. My hope is to be that for you tonight. That's what I'm hoping to do, is to demonstrate that there are people who truly believe in the hope of God that is the church. That's the hope. The hope was the church. And I believe in that. And I live a life that I hope exemplifies that. And that's the best convincing I can do, is live and tell people my experience. So now, doubling back to why I believe that, as I began to go on do research, I began to have a feeling of sanity, where things make sense. God, even in my darkest moments, I know God. Otherwise, I'm nuts. I'll let you know that, Alan. That's one of the areas that we're going to have to go, is that either Mike Miano knows God or he's completely nuts. That's it. I must be nuts. And now I say that, or a flip side of saying that would be, I'm either stupid, too stupid to understand, or I'm spiritually minded, which again, I would declare is the way that we need to understand the things of God. Now, spiritually minded doesn't mean a certain interpretation, as some folks have limited us to. I believe, as you know, I believe Christianity is young. I believe we have a lot to learn. I believe the church has done a horrible job of living up to what it's supposed to be. And again, I believe that is the hope of the world. So that's why that's the way I believe I could prove this. Now, I came up with questions and examples because I was like, if I believed a person existed that I have a relationship with, and somebody told me they didn't believe that that person existed, it goes back to what I told you. I told that preacher when he told me about preterism. Why would I bother? Why would I bother going back and forth with somebody that told me they don't believe a person that I know exists? And that's where it becomes a tricky part for me, this conversation, because I say, well, that becomes the tricky part, is that I don't believe I could prove God to you, except for living a life that is reasonable and seek, search, study, and prove, and live up to my values, contrary to the damage that the church has done, the Western church, if you will. And I believe that is the answer to the problems of this world. I believe that is the answer to the hurts and hangups. Now, why God chose to do this for me, the scripture seems to confirm that he calls and chooses those who are his. I feel that. I know that. And why? I don't know. Maybe because I'm just so far gone that God said that he needs love. And we need to bring him in here, So that's where, now again, I want to be very clear. My hope for tonight was to do a discussion. But I do believe that we can meet together next week and have some real deal debate information. As you know, Alan, I'm not going to just say I'm going to do the work. I'm going to go. I'm going to think. And my hope would be that, I will look into some of this. I'm not as familiar with the scientific understandings or the materialistic understandings. I've appreciated, evolutionary theism. I've appreciated the other aspects, sometimes being willing to admit I'm probably not smart enough to understand what I'm reading. Plus, I've landed in a covenant creation world, so I really don't get into the weeds with the materialism when it comes to the Bible. And I think Christians have done far more damage. That's why I mentioned Lee Strobel and Ray Comfort and these men lightly, because I know they've done far more damage in responding to these things than being helpful. So that's what I hope that we will narrow things down to do a debate. But I want to just put a lot of this out there so folks would know that I'm not coming to the table claiming that I'm going to answer every question. I've listened to some of your stuff about ethics, if you will, and the ethics of God. And if you do believe in God, why would you believe this is okay? And I think some of that could be responded to. I think some folks have responded quite well. And then some of it, I think, is out of the range of reason, where it's, and I know I'm not the person, I'm definitely not the man that God has chosen to correct all the problems with that. So, that's where I just want to make sure that we know that I'm entering into this discussion, namely because, you had made a post saying, why wouldn't I be willing to do it? I am willing. Do I feel 100% equipped? I could tell you why I know God, because, again, I've done research. The research I've done, I would love to. Maybe even we could look at Lee Strobel's book, and we can see there were, scientific details. Like one of the things he mentioned that would really provoked me to think, wow, there might be merit to this, was when Jesus's heart was pierced with the spear. And, the water and the blood came out. And obviously in that time, I don't know that they had, even though I think we limit them and we say that they didn't have medical knowledge, they had medical knowledge. But again, the argument Lee Strobel made in the book was that in the first century, they wouldn't have even been able to qualify what that medical term was. That was just a miracle. But again, now we've discerned that there's something. If your heart is completely stressed, you carried the cross, you've been beaten, you know what's about to happen. Take that in. Yeah, I'd say he was pretty stressed on that cross. And then, to pierce his heart, obviously after he gave up the ghost, pierce his heart, and then he gave up the ghost. But the piercing of his heart, that shocked me. I read that in that book and I was like, wow, that's interesting. So you see, those are the type of things that I'd be willing to hear your perspective of and see, well, then why wouldn't that provoke me to start thinking, maybe God does exist, and then to pray and to feel the experiences that I have. I don't know how that can be disproven other than, Mike needs to seek a counselor. Maybe I have a wonderful counselor, right? That's what I guess we would call him. But maybe I need a natural, a natural counselor in that regard. So that's really, where I hope to go, Alan. And I hope I've given you some things to, nail down and, say, I imagine it'll be tricky, and that's what I think it should be, by the way. I didn't want to come here and, have my 5 points that I'm going to, debate with you. Alan, that doesn't, I think Christians have put their foot in their mouth far too many times, and that is not my mind and heart this evening or anytime I have a discussion with you.
Yeah. So when you talk about the Bible and you have this example of Jesus with the heart pierce or whatever, I'm not even convinced that you can take the Bible as completely true story without faith. Again, we're back to faith. So that would be my basic response to any of these miracles, even though that one can be qualified now as a scientific thing, not a miracle. But I mean, am I hearing you say that eventually all the miracles in the Bible we'll discover aren't really miracles?
Well, I think that gets tricky because there's a couple different answers, right, in the Christian worldview about miracles. I would say that the impact of the miracle was something beyond the natural, right? And that really wasn't the thing that was happening, right? We might be able to find out how Jesus turned water into wine, sure. However, a natural explanation, and I've gone that route. I've tried to, do that work. I heard you talk about the Exodus, just to let you know, I do a little bit of my homework here, and look into it a bit. And when you talked about the Exodus, I said, well, there are some that would say that it was a myth, right? That it was a spiritual story to encourage the people. Okay, I wouldn't be opposed to that. I don't think that disproves that God exists. And again, I know you want to push that I have to prove that God exists, right? And I get that. And I hope that as folks are listening to this, they're saying, that's a very good question. Does God exist or does God not exist, right? There are polar opposites there. And it's an interesting way to look at the question.
I would not even say that those are the only two options. I would say believing one does and not believing one does. Those are the two options. That's A and not A. But does God exist or does God not exist? That's saying that the only two options are you have to take an affirmation point that God does exist or an affirmation point that he does not. And I'm saying you don't necessarily have to take the affirmation point that he does not. I'm in a place where I'm saying, I don't know. And I'm content to say, I don't know because I don't know. Maybe God does exist. I'm simply saying to take it on faith is not a reliable way to determine a conclusion. It's not justified. And so that would be where I'm at. So I'm not sitting here saying, I know God doesn't exist. Since you can't prove it, that means he doesn't. Just because you can't prove it doesn't mean he doesn't. And even if the Bible isn't true, doesn't mean God doesn't exist.
That's right. I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah. So, I mean, this isn't an issue of if you can't prove it, it means he doesn't.
That's right.
My concern is if you can't demonstrate or prove that God exists when you declare definitively that you know that he does, my concern is why are you believing and embracing something and living your life for something when you actually don't know? You're just claiming to know and you're taking it on faith. And in my opinion, it's because you were indoctrinated and brainwashed like I was growing up. And we just never questioned the existence of God. And we got stuck in a matrix, a Christian matrix that we never thought to question. Like it never even crossed my mind that God wasn't an option. It was just like, that was just it. That was all there was to it. Even when I was in school, my parents were just like, oh, those scientists, that's science class. All they want to do is prove God doesn't exist. That's their whole goal, is to tear down it turns out that's not at all what their goal is. They don't give a shit one way or another whether God does or doesn't exist. They're not out to prove God doesn't exist. They have testable things and they test them, and whatever populates is what they, draw conclusions on. It's not like they put together a system and said, make sure this doesn't include God. Nobody's doing that. No, what's that?
I said they hate God.
Yeah, nobody's doing that. Nobody hates God. We just don't believe he exists. I don't hate God. In fact, I didn't leave Christianity because I was pissed or angry or anything like that. It was nothing to do with it at all. It had no bearing on my decision to become, and it's not even a decision. You just don't believe anymore. You just wake up. You're like, oh my gosh, I was just an atheist instantly. And then I realized all the reasons that it happened over time. But in that moment, it felt like it was just like this one-time thing. But anyway, I'm on a sidetrack. But but I think I lost my train of thought. Where was I going with that?
Actually, if I may jump in there, I just want to say two things, and I want to ask you a question. Are you willing to share how you became an atheist? Because I shared at the beginning.
Yes.
Maybe that could be a place we land, is you sharing a bit about, how you became an atheist. So before you do that, though, I just wanted to mention, I want to let you know that my ethos here with you tonight is exactly how I live my life. So I have a ministry at our church where we help people with food, clothing, etc. Majority of the people that show up there to help us help other people are folks that are agnostic or atheist. And it seems as though many people get really, nervous around that type of stuff. And I don't, because I don't believe that I'm going to be able to prove anything to anybody other than living out what I have faith in. That's faith with works. Is I not only do I believe God exists, but I believe God exists so much so that I'm going to devote my life to him, which I believe is faith, is walking in the thing that you believe in. That's what makes me better than Satan, if you will, right? Because even Satan and his demons believe and tremble. So for me, the way I've come to understand that and live that out in my life is that my faith is an outworking of what I believe. So my faith is me putting my hand to the plow. My faith is me, hoping to demonstrate that the church is the hope of the nations, not dying and going to heaven, but the hope of the people of God has been the church. And I hope I live that out. So my point in sharing that with you would be that I don't get anxious. I don't go on evangelistic crusades every Thursday when we have volunteers in the building. I don't even feel. I have my moments where, to be fair, I have my moments even where I was like, do I need to lead this in prayer before I start with Alan? And I have my moments there likewise where it's like, do I need to get extra spiritual to provoke? And I want to let you know, I haven't gotten there. So I want you to know that my posturing tonight is the same way I live my life, that I'm not overly anxious to lead people to Jesus. And again, I'm a pastor. I need to grow this church, man. And, so I get it, but that's not the right way. It's not it. It's this, it's having conversation, learning from you. It's learning and taking that and saying, and I'll bring up another scriptural example would be in Acts 17. The Apostle Paul's way was not to go and kick over every stone and burn everything up. And, it wasn't to do that. It was to say, hey, this statue you have, right? This is, so my hope in our conversations would be to meet you where you're at and learn and challenge myself. And then, yes, challenge you to reconsider, reassess some of the things you said. So with that, I want to go ahead and ask you and please respond if you feel the need, but please share with us a bit, and with me, how you became an atheist. What was that journey, or what kind of turned your mind to where you're at now?
Sure, I will in just a moment. Can I just one more thing that I feel like we still need to nail down before we part, because to me it's crucial to our overall discussion. And I feel like we just jumped off it too quickly. I don't want to waste time in our actual debate times defining faith. I'd like to get to a definition of faith, because earlier you said faith is the evidence and you don't have any other evidence beyond that to prove that God exists. And then a little while ago, when I asked you, is there anything that can't be taken on faith? You said yes. And then you said, studies show something. You gave a bunch of things that were producing evidence to substantiate the faith. And I was like, really confused by that, because first you're saying it's faith without evidence. And then when I asked you, is there anything that can't be taken on faith? You said, oh, well, yeah, but you still have to verify your faith. That's confusing to me. So can we how are you defining faith?
Sure. Now, that's something, of course, I want to go ahead and I'll do my Bible study, if you will, and put together a better answer, than I'm going to give you now. But I would say that belief and faith are very different than one another. There is a Greek difference. Like I said, I can dig it up. Belief would be the understanding that I believe in something. I believe it, whether it's true or not. Maybe I've done the research and I believe it. Faith, in my estimation, is the verb, as you've probably heard many preachers talk about it. Faith is a verb, meaning it's my belief now being put into practice. So that's why, bringing our attention back to Hebrews 11, faith is the evidence of things not seen, not belief, not people believing in stuff, not you believing in anything, but rather people putting that work into practice is the evidence of things not seen and the reason or the substance of things hoped for. Now, how would I answer that with the second point that you mentioned? Regarding can that be, is there anything that we don't have to have faith in, right? I don't believe that everything. If you asked me,
No, that wasn't the question.
okay, go ahead, please.
The question is there anything that can't be taken on faith? Not that we have faith in everything. I have beliefs, just like you do, but my beliefs are drawn from the evidence, and then I draw a conclusion based on the evidence. And when I'm convinced of something, that's when I believe something. I have a belief because I was convinced by the evidence. Belief in God is not based on being convinced by evidence. It's based on being convinced by faith alone. Faith is the evidence. It is not saying faith is the evidence of things unseen. It's just saying faith is the evidence. That's it. So your whole evidence is faith, and because of faith, you draw a conclusion that God exists. So if I may just throw a definition out, I would say that faith is a method by which conclusions are drawn without sufficient justification. Okay. Maybe another way to say that would be Matt Dillahunty's definition that I love as well. Faith is the excuse people give when they don't have a reason.
Okay. Now, in my life, I guess I would say that you mentioned the Bible before, right? Taking the Bible on faith. Part of my misunderstanding the wording. I don't believe that when I began to read the Bible, that I believed it was true. That wasn't the prerequisite there. It was, I began reading the Bible because I was interested and I was open-minded to it being true. And as I studied, I don't know that I've seen much that would cause me to question my understanding of the Bible or the Bible being true. And that is based on research. That is based on studies. All the while knowing that there's been various interpretations, misinterpretations of the scriptures. But I haven't seen much disprove. I watched your video on the Easter parallels there and the problems with that. Just because one person mentions that John and Peter showed up and the other person mentions just Peter, that doesn't, or just John for that matter, or whoever came first and all the different details. Again, I want to brush up on that if that was something we were putting on the table. I don't find problem with the historicity of the Bible at all. So as I did my journey, I guess I'm seeing it a bit differently than you. I had an open paradigm to the Christian faith, and I had previously been pushed in that direction in my earlier years. I wasn't convinced of it. I didn't read the Bible as somebody that was convinced of it. I read the Bible as somebody that was curious and interested in, and read Lee Strobel's book as somebody that was curious and interested, and then was provoked with evidence to further consider these things and to acknowledge a belief in God. Again, I don't ever know that, as I mentioned in my life, that I had a very limited period of, and I did, unlike you, I did question, does God exist? I did question what God it is. I was open to Baal. If Baal would have convinced me, if there was maybe literature, I didn't get much literature in prison from the Baal religion, if you will. But again, even that, I admit, I'm predisposed to a Christian culture. I know that. But I don't know much that's causing me to question that. And that's where, I guess when I'm listening to you and even hearing your teachings, I'm not finding much that's causing me to say, oh man, I might not believe in this. Contrary to, again, a lot of people on Facebook, even people that I call themselves Christians. I'm like, man, you folks need to get it together here and believe in the things you believe. I do. And I haven't found much that causes me to question that. So now to respond to, is there anything that can't be taken on faith? My reading of the Bible wasn't taken on faith.
No, you're still not answering the question. You're still answering, are there things that you aren't taking on faith? That isn't my question. I'm asking you, is there anything that can't be taken on faith?
Is there anything? Yeah, I might need you to reword that.
I'm not asking you, is there anything that you do that isn't taken on faith? I'm saying, is there anything that can't be taken on faith? Like if I decide that I have faith that my blue cup is yellow, that I can take it on faith. I can take it on faith that the sky is going to fall tomorrow. I take it on faith. My question is there anything that can't be taken on faith, that you can't just believe by faith?
You shouldn't take much on faith. I don't believe that. I don't believe you should. I don't need a light that says that.
I guess that's my question then, is how do you decide what can be taken on faith?
what can be taken on faith is what I have faith in is the church. And how I take that on faith is because I believe that God is, and I diligently seek him. That's what I take on faith. Everything else, I think, again, I'm known for the fact, and I think you know this about me, things need to make sense. I'm a thinker. I'm going to think all day. I'm going to think about it. I'm going to make it make sense. So I don't know what, from your perspective, doesn't make sense, except for the fact that I know a guy and I have a relationship with him that you don't believe exists. And, you know, as I think about it, the sovereign grace perspective, by the way, puts me in a place where, you know, I don't know that I have to convince you he exists. What I know is he exists.
What it sounds to me like you're saying is the reason you're choosing to have faith is because there was evidence to grant that it was a reasonable faith.
Yes. The reason I have faith is that there was evidence that this.
So the evidence came first.
Okay. Did the evidence come first, or?
Well, if the reason you're saying that faith is logical in God and not these other things is because there must have been a good reason for you to decide that. The evidence came first.
Or God was leading me in that direction to consider the evidence.
Well, either way, he provided you evidence, and that's what convinced you, and that's what gave you faith.
Sure.
So it's not faith alone anymore. It is based on evidence. And I'm saying to you, then if that's the case, then why can't I be given the evidence that substantiates a reason for me to have faith?
You can.
Well, that's what I'm looking for in this debate, is for you to provide that evidence that you had that convinced you that faith was a reasonable way to choose God.
You watch my social media?
Do I?
Yes.
No.
Oh, I'd encourage you to do so. That'll be my best effort during the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
For you to see what a life looks like lived out for Jesus, and show me where I'm wrong. You know,
but that's still not answering the question. You're talking about what James is talking about. Faith without works is dead. So you're talking about the result of it, but I'm still stuck on how did you conclude that faith was reasonable in God and not in unicorns? And you said, well, the evidence led you there. So it is evidence-based and it is not faith-based.
No, my belief. So I began to read the Bible as not a believer. So you're right. Yeah. The evidence led me to read the Bible, and the biblical evidence led me to have faith in God's purpose, which is the church. You see, that's where I think there's a necessary distinction, that faith, people seem to think that faith is like, again, as you're positing, wishful thinking. That's not what faith is. Faith is believing so much in what you say you believe that God is, and he's a rewarder of those who diligently seek him, which is the biblical definition in Hebrews 11, then that's a life well lived. That is the evidence for what I have faith in. The church is.
So you're defining faith then as confidence, basically. Trust. Sure. Okay. Well, then there is got to be a reason to base that confidence and trust on. And you said it was evidence, not faith. The faith comes from the evidence. You're defining faith as confidence and trust. That's the way I'm defining faith. That's the way I use faith. But when I conclude, when I draw a conclusion with my confidence, it's because I have evidence to substantiate my confidence. Sure. You're saying the same thing. And so I'm saying, okay, great. You had some sort of evidence that convinced you. That's the evidence I want, because if it convinced you, it should convince me, right?
Sure. Well, the Bible's true. It should convince you. Absolutely. The Bible's true.
Well, that's a claim. You'd still have to defend that.
Okay. So let's talk about it. Now, again, you still have to share with us how you became an atheist. So we're going to land there, right? We'll end on that. But okay. So what would you like me to defend about the Bible being true? We know that it was written across cultures. You know, you said it very well in your video, right? It was written across cultures, thousands of years, different people. I don't know about different agendas. You know, it seems, again, I don't think unity means conformity. I think unity, it can be expressed in diversity of thought, which, you know, some writers are writing about the judgment of God. Some writers are writing about the hope of what it's going to look like. And, you know, then there's been various interpretations. Maybe there's been some, I don't know about too much damage to the manuscripts, as the Dead Sea Scrolls seem to make a good case for preservation of ancient documentation by the Jews, at least. So I don't know. I guess I don't see I felt that the evidence is rather compelling for the Bible. and for the historicity of Jesus's crucifixion and the resurrection, obviously. And again, that's where I think there's a distinction. I don't know that I have to argue about having a belief in the historical resurrection. That's something that, you have to do the work and figure out. The faith is a life lived based on the historical resurrection of Jesus. That's what faith is. Faith is something that you do based on the things you believe. So that's where I don't want to get boxed in here. I don't have a problem with evidence. I'm not, I might not fit into somebody's box of reformed view, but for me, I do believe, and I live a life that demands evidence. And I know you offered up a challenge in your book that there's some tests to take. I'll do that. I'll do the work, and I will gladly let you know as we go through this dialogue, hopefully, and as I read your book, where I land and how that works. Being also, go ahead, please.
Well, it sounds to me like since you are defining faith as confidence in evidence, you're not defining faith as the evidence. So I don't see how your definition aligns with Hebrews 11:1, but that's fine. I'm more interested in your definition anyway, because I really would like to know how you were convinced. And you say the Bible, the truth of the Bible. So it sounds to me like that is going to have to be our focal point. Because if in fact the Bible is not true, then you have no reason to believe a God exists.
Well, I don't know about that. I guess if you were able to prove to me, which again, I've been living a life like this since 2005. My gang life wasn't all that bad, by the way. I changed my life because of the truth of the Bible. You're absolutely right. But let me fix that. My gang life was very horrible to people outside of my life. My life to me, my gang life was not bad to me personally. I didn't convert to the Christian faith because I needed a get out of jail card, get out of jail free card, or get out of my gang. No, I grappled with my understanding of who God is. Now, I say that because if you prove the Bible, in my estimation, if you prove the Bible wrong, well, then you just prove that this idea of God is wrong. For me, I don't know that would push me to say God doesn't exist. That would push me to say, well, maybe Baal is right, or maybe because again, I don't have enough faith. I really mean that I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. I don't have enough information in front of me that would say this all came about by itself, knowing all the details and interests in, I'm not going to even bother trying to say the word, but all the details of this world. For me, that's a hard, sell that it just happened like this. All the amazing details of all the detail happened. The eye, right? I remember I read a book by somebody about the details of the eye and how that cannot just naturally come about. That's compelling to me to think. I'd need somebody to tell me, yeah, it did. It just happened. That's where I need evidence to that. So no, I don't know that you would make me an atheist necessarily by proving the Bible wrong. I think you would just push me to consider what other God or gods might there be, and how did I end up so wrongly identifying with him? That's where I would end up.
Do you think faith is praiseworthy?
Faith is praiseworthy.
Having faith, is that praiseworthy?
Yeah, I'd say so.
So the more faith you have, the better, right?
Yeah, I'd hope so, right? God is pleased by faith.
So if you don't have enough faith to be an atheist, then doesn't that make us better? Because we have more faith than you do. On the other hand,
if your God is true or your lack of God is true, yes. If your belief is true, then by all means you'd be, but again, I want to be careful with that because I'm not posturing myself. I'm not trying to please God. That's I live a life.
If faith is praiseworthy, then number one, it seems like it's a good thing to be an atheist because you don't have enough faith to be an atheist and we have more faith than you. But if you're saying it's a bad thing to have faith like an atheist, then doesn't that denigrate your whole view of faith in general? Why would you want to have faith if faith is a bad thing? And you said earlier that you can't have faith in everything.
Right. Well, but my sovereign grace views would lead me to believe that you should, by every account, live in line with your conscience. You should live up to your values. If you're an atheist and you have faith in whatever that evidence and hope is, by all means, live up to it. Because again, even, and that is the biblical answer, by the way, because even the prophet said things to the effect that, whatever God you choose to serve, by all means serve that God. And I do believe that atheism is a God in that sense. I believe it's impossible not to believe in God. So for me, I do believe that atheism, obviously, you know where that lands, that you become the God, right? That's where ultimately I would put most folks in this world, that they've made themselves God. And atheism is just another understanding of folks making themselves God. And
can we define God, since you're going to say that? I would like to understand your definition of God.
a higher power.
Just a higher power, that's it?
Sure.
So why the need to believe in this Yahweh, supernatural, all-knowing, eternally existing thing if it's just a higher power? If I'm equally a higher power as God is, then literally my cat could have created the universe.
And if your cat did, your cat's worthy of praise and worship and having faith in his or her whims and desires for you.
Sure, but I guess what I'm asking is, if we're going, like, when we're discussing the existence of God, it sounds to me like the only definition of God you have is it's a higher power. That's all you're going for? That's what you're defending?
Well, no, I believe God is Jehovah, the God of the Bible, Yahweh, manifested through the invisible God, manifest through Jesus Christ. I believe that is my definition of God. But if we're going to go for a very simple, basic understanding, because again, I said that an atheist is making themselves, sorry to point at you, but just to add some passion to this, you've made yourself God. So yes, I would say that you've made yourself the higher power. You have made yourself Jesus Christ. You made yourself the higher power in your life.
Right, but does Jesus have any attributes beyond higher power? Like, what are the attributes you're defining as God? Because if all you're saying is it's a higher power, I mean, okay, sure, I'm a God then.
Every Sunday I have 4 attributes that you've heard often. Isaiah 9:6, right? Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Prince of Peace, Everlasting Father.
Well, God was in the definition. Then you can't use God in the definition of defining God. You said Almighty God is Almighty God. You're defining.
How you said, how else would I describe him? So I was just adding. So I'll take that one out. Sorry. Wonderful.
Okay, that's fine. Keep going. Sorry.
Everlasting Father, and again, I can come up with. I think there's like.
Okay, so everlasting. We'll go with that one.
Amen.
Everlasting. That's the definition of a God. So how can I be a God?
Well, in your life, you are the beginning and the end.
I don't believe I'm everlasting.
You don't have to believe it.
But you just said that it's the definition of a God.
Right, but you don't have to believe in my definitions. But the definition I would give you as a God is
the whole God we're trying to understand is your God, the God that you believe exists. You believe it's the true God. So I want to know that God, and you're saying I'm the same as that God.
Well, no, I'm saying you've made yourself the same.
How did I make myself everlasting? That's weird.
I don't know. Trust me, I don't know how somebody could become an atheist. I agree with you.
Well, you don't become an. I mean, I guess you do.
You have to tell me. I don't know. You haven't told me yet.
We'll end there. Okay, so it sounds to me like I can tell you we're going to have to spend some time on this thing of faith and truth of the Bible. And all right, cool.
Preacher's dream, by the way, that is a preacher's dream.
Yeah,
spend some time on faith and the truth of the Bible. I mean, come
on. That's funny. All right, so that sounds good. So we'll end on my reverse testimony. How I escaped. So the perspective that I had, I'll tell first, and then I'll tell what I believe really happened and how I escaped. So I was when I had shut down Lift Church, got divorced, went through that whole shebang. I got really depressed. I went through a major depression. I dated a girl for a little while, and that didn't work out. And anyway, but I shouldn't have even done that because I was in a depression already. I was not in a good place, and it just progressively got worse and worse. And it was to a point where I couldn't stand on my own 2 feet, and I don't mean that metaphorically. I literally couldn't stand on my own 2 feet. I would just collapse randomly and just break down. I was just in such bad shape. At first, I didn't have a job. I was living off credit cards. It was a nightmare, man. It was really, really bad, man. You can imagine my whole life was being a pastor, and that was just all I knew. That was my identity. Galen, she was my wife since I was 22, man. And we were dating since I was 20. So, that was my whole life. I knew nothing. So, it hit me bad. I went through a major, major depression. I had to move in with my parents, at 40 years old. That was really sad, really tough. But I moved in with them and lived with them for a couple of years. During that time, I went through therapy, severe therapy, both by Christian therapists and counselors and pastors, and then a secular therapist who happened to be Jewish, but he was a secular therapist. And I found that the more I did the therapy and counseling with the pastor and the Christian counselors, the more depressed I got. They were not helping me because they continued to dig in and talk about how if I would have just not done this, or God wanted me to stay married, and that's the reason that I'm feeling like this. And it was just constant. It was like beratement. It wasn't like helpful. There was no healing there. It was just, you're the problem. If you just did more, if you just do more, then you'll find God again. It was painful, man. It was, whew, I remember that was just putting me worse. So I was like, I can't do this. I got to find a secular therapist, because I was like, why the hell not? I'll give it a try. So I did. And this guy, man, literally saved my life, man. He just knew his stuff, man. He dug deep with me, really helped me get through all of my horrible thoughts about myself being worthless and worthy of nothing. My divorce, my split with my other girlfriend, like, just helped me really dig myself out of this severe depression that I was in. However, therapists do that, man. He was just magical. And lo and behold, over the course of the 2 years, I really started to be like a man again instead of mush. It was amazing how that feeling, like, I just remember that feeling of just not being able to even think straight. Like just getting out of bed was so hard, man. Like I would have to give myself little challenges. Like, okay, today you're just gonna put your socks on. Like, that's all I could do that day. With stuff like that. And eventually, I could take a shower, and then eventually I could go for runs. And next thing you know, I'm like getting in shape and getting ripped. That was like, it was a lot of changes. So it was just really progressive. But I was going on these, but I was spending a lot of time also like praying, reading the Bible, just doing what I could to try to find God, because he would just seem so aloof. And I was begging and crying out and asking people. And I would even meet with family, friends, and other Christians who would take me out and ask me questions like, how's your walk with the Lord? And I remember asking that when I was a pastor to people all the time. And then sitting there on that side of it, I was like, the hell does that mean? Like, it just seemed so foreign. Like, what does that look like? Was he asking me, are you reading your Bible enough? Are you praying enough? Are you going to church? Like, what did that mean? How is your walk with the Lord? So bizarre to me. I thought I knew what it meant, but then sitting on that side, I can understand how people must have felt when I would ask them. So I really didn't even know how to answer that, but I just knew that I was doing all the stuff that people would say is a walk with the Lord. I was doing it all, but yet I didn't feel God. It was just something was just off. It was very frustrating because, here I am in my greatest time of need in my whole life, genuinely believing, man, I had faith. I really did, man. You knew me. I would have a hard time believing you'd be one of those guys that would say that I didn't have genuine faith and actually believe. Like, I lived this stuff, man. It was my life. I was so passionate. It's all I did. Like you, man. That's all I did. I went to school for it. I went to seminary for it. That's all I did. Like, I just loved the Bible. So anyway, here I am, just trying real hard, going on prayer walks, going on prayer runs. And I met with my friend Jeremiah, who had also found his way out of the faith before I did. And I didn't know. It'd been years he was out, and we hadn't talked. And he just happened to live nearby. And I was like, oh, well, let's get together. And we talked, and he was just expressing to me that he was no longer a Christian and that there was life outside of Christianity. And I was just like, there is? Like, what are you talking about? No life outside of Christianity. It's ridiculous. It just didn't compute. I was like, that's impossible. What are you talking about? But it was like, it hit me hard. I was like, there's life outside of Christianity. I couldn't even fathom that concept. It just never crossed my mind. I never even dreamt of it. Questioning whether God existed was never even on my mind. All I cared about was getting close to him again and feeling his presence. Like, so it wasn't about leaving. I just prayed and begged and cried and talked and read my Bible and went to church. I just did everything. I couldn't go to church every week, unfortunately, because my job at USPS required me to work on a lot of Sundays. So that was one of the things I couldn't do as much as I really wished I did at the time, but I couldn't do it. But there was the next day after my meeting with Jeremiah, I was going for a prayer walk again, or a prayer run. And I was doing my warm-up walk on the way out the driveway. And I'm just praying, and I'm mid-sentence. And I literally just stopped mid-sentence talking to God and just let the air just emanate for a minute. And I said, I think I'm an atheist. In that moment, it was just like some prison doors flipped open. And for the first time in my life, I could see a real world out there. And I wasn't stuck in this matrix where I was blinded from seeing reality. It was just, it was almost like my life flashed before me. Everything I had ever believed, I was just like, what in the world was I thinking? It was in that moment. And it didn't even take, it wasn't even a question. I didn't even have to decide what I was going to be. I wasn't like scared of atheism. I just knew I either believed God existed or I didn't. And in that moment, I just didn't anymore. And it was gone. And I was just an atheist. That seemed really crazy to me because, dude, I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't trying to get out. I wasn't trying to run to some sinful life. I wasn't anything like that. I just woke up and I couldn't for the life of me understand what happened. And if there is a God, he's a pretty horrible father to do that to somebody. Especially if he's in the view that you hold where he's in complete control of this. So what am I supposed to do, right? But anyway, that's what it appeared to me, that it was just instantaneous, out of the blue. And I was like, what? I didn't know what happened. Frankly, I didn't care. I was just happy. I felt free. It was like a freedom I could never describe to you until you actually experience it. Any atheist yet escaped Christianity would tell you the same thing. It's just an unbelievable freedom. And no, it's not a freedom to sin or whatever. We don't even believe sin exists. It's not a thing to us. But at the time, I didn't know that. I had a lot of studying and research to figure out what my life was now because, I am standing. It was like I was standing in the precipice of nothing but darkness. I didn't know anything else but a pastor. In fact, during those 2 years, all I ever cared about was trying to find a way to plant a new church because that's all I wanted to do. I just loved the truth of preterism and scripture and everything. So that's all I wanted to do. So here I am. I'm like, well, I guess that's out. It's like, what do I do now? So, boy, that took me some time to figure my life out. Because I didn't foresee myself being a USPS man forever. I thought that was just a temporary job. I used to be the guy that would sit on my couch working on my sermons. And when the USPS guy would drive by, I'd be like, glad I don't have that job. now that's my job. But anyway, so I kind of come to love it now. But anyway, skipping around. So what really happened? What happened that day? A couple years later, I did an interview with Jen Fishburne. I think you saw that interview, and she asked me and I was at that time where I hadn't done any thinking about this. So 2 years had gone by. I went undercover. I just went dark. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to deal with anything from my past. I was just happy to be out of it, and I just wanted to live. So there was I never had any intention of doing any of this. It wasn't even on my mind. But it was that interview. And before the interview, Jen was talking to me on the phone, and she was like, we had a great conversation. And she said, maybe you should come back into the world again and, share your thoughts because you had an impact before. Maybe you can again. And I was like, wow, how do you do that as an atheist? I just thought there was no point. But anyway, then she did that interview and she asked me a really big question. And throughout that interview, I didn't know half the things I was saying because I was still trying to figure things out as I was talking on the fly. But I thought, why not? I'll give it a try. I'm a public speaker, but whatever. Come a long way since that interview. But anyway, she asked me a question. She said, Alan, what made you become an atheist? And I didn't know what to say. I'm like, I don't know. So I had to go, but I'm this guy that has to solve puzzles. I can't be content with just not knowing something. So I have to be on a search. So even when I say I don't know, I hate that position. I don't like it. It's uncomfortable. I want to know. So I'll keep researching. And some things you just can't know. And we try, but we give our best. But this, I was like, I bet you there's an answer. And I thought to myself, if I can figure out why, maybe I can help others out too. And that's what I went on my journey of trying to understand how I escaped Christianity and without even trying. And that's where this book came from that I wrote, Unravelation, How Those of Faith Find Freedom. I had been a heavy smoker. You knew that when I was there in Florida. And then I had quit for a couple of years. And then when I went through my depression, I had read a book called Alan Carr's Easy Way to Stop Smoking. And that's just like magic. Helped me you're smoking 1 second, you turn that last page and you're just like, I don't even like this anymore. It's just the weirdest thing happens. You're just done with it. No cravings, no desire for it. Just like, but anyway, and I would have never smoked again, except I went through that depression. And then when I was working with my coworkers, we'd go out and they would smoke in front of me and they'd offer me one. And I was like, whatever, I don't even care anymore. My life's shit. So why not? So I started smoking again. and I got heavily addicted again, and it was bad. I smoked for 2 years. But I remember about year one into it, after about 1 year into smoking, again, I didn't want to anymore, but I couldn't stop. I was so heavily addicted. It was just like, I didn't know what to do. And I thought just knowing the stuff from before that it would just magically do it, but it didn't work. So I said to myself, I'm going to read this book again, and I'm going to quit again. But the magic wasn't there the second time. And the way that one of the people at the company described it to me was that when you watch a movie for the first time that has a surprise ending, like The Sixth Sense, I don't know if you've seen that before, but you're like, whoa, and you get the chill effect, and all this happens. But if you see it the second time, it doesn't quite have the same effect. So that's what happened with the book. It just didn't have the same effect. But I was committed to finding out how to get that magic back. So I did their course, they like this, where you talk to people virtually, and they do a teaching thing. And they were about 4 hours each, and it was like $400 to pay for this thing. It's a money back guarantee if it doesn't work. But I paid for it, and I did it 3 times. I was that desperate to stop smoking. But I knew that if I had to live with cravings the rest of my life, I'm just going to smoke, because I don't want to live like that. That's just a miserable way to live. But I knew that somehow I could get out of it, because I really wanted to get rid of the craving. So I read this book. I promise you this is going somewhere. I know you probably think I'm rambling, but I promise you this is going somewhere. This is an important part of my story. So I read that. So it didn't work the 3 times. So I devoted myself to reading the book and reading the book and reading the book. I read that book like 30 times. That's all I did with my life, was sit there and read my book as I smoked. I just wanted to quit so bad. Somewhere along the line, reading that book over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, just putting it in my mind, finally something magical happened. And one day something triggered in me. And I said to myself, hey, the only thing holding me back is the fact that I just won't let it go. I don't know what it was. I had this vision of me fighting a prison guard in a gladiator battle, and he was the cigarette. And if I just walked away and never walked back, I'd win. And for some reason it worked. And it was just like magic, boom, just like that. Haven't smoked again since. And that was like 5 years ago. And I'm super happy about it. Like, I will never do that to myself again, because I don't think I could pull it off a third time. Anyway, so here's how this story comes full circle. I believe that while reading that book and removing the brainwashing that made me think I loved smoking, because that's the trick to the book. He removes the brainwashing that makes you think you like something and that you need it. Once that brainwashing is gone, you no longer think you need it, and it's not hard to not do what you don't want to do. So it was during the time that I was doing that over and over again, I think I was removing the brainwashing of Christianity too. And that's why I finally quit Christianity, because they came so close together. It was amazing. So that's what happened, in my opinion. And so when I was driving down the road one day after Jen's conversation, I was trying to figure out what is the reason. So I put myself back in the Bible again, back to reading scripture, back to praying and all this. And I heard this song. I was listening to Christian. I even started listening to Christian music again. And I remember this song by DC Talk come on. I'm addicted to Jesus. And man, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, that's it. It's an addiction. And if I can help people see that it's an addiction and remove the brainwashing that makes them think they need God when they actually don't, I bet you they can get free. Because it was like all of this came into my mind. I was like, that's the timing of when I quit. So that's what developed unravelation for me, because I realized if I can quit with smoking using an unraveling method like removing the brainwashing, I bet you I can do the same thing for people in Christianity. So I do have a genuine desire to help people. I care very much, but I also know that you're not going to convince somebody to leave Christianity through just debate. You got to remove the brainwashing. You got to unravel it. That's the only possible way. And that's what the book seeks to do. So I'm glad you're reading the book. I'm really happy about that, because we'll just see what happens with that. But at any rate, that's the long and short of my story and why I'm where I'm at. And I'm sorry that took so long, but you asked and I delivered.
You did. No reason to be apologetic. I appreciate you sharing. And, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to hear about your depression. I'm sorry to hear about, the lack of Christians considerably caring about you, and anybody for that. But, I'm sure you had family and friends that came up alongside you, and it sounds like some good atheistic folks joined in and helped out, but I'm sorry to hear, about your journey. I don't want to make light of that. And I'm I'm sorry for those dark moments, because I will let you know, I guess when I listen to what you're sharing, two things stand out to me. One is I've asked a lot of questions and I've never stopped. I still ask a lot of questions. It sounds as though you got to a point where you were comfortable with your Christian view, that you didn't ask a lot of the questions that I've asked for years. And I've had some very dark moments in my life, moments that have caused me to, even in walking in ministry, dare I be transparent there, that have caused me to ask some real hard questions in my heart, my mind. Is this true? Do I believe this? Why do I believe this? God, are you there? I've been there. So I want to lament with you, that I don't think Christians are equipped. And I've said this, I'm kind of I'm quoted as saying that I don't think Christians are equipped for the darkness that's out there. I don't know that we talk about, the gates of hell are not supposed to prevail against the church. I think we've done a horrible job of that. So, what I do hope, what I know I can prove to you, is what somebody who truly believes what they believe and is putting their hand to the plow in that regard, and is willing to test it out, and is willing to, like you, I think there are things that can't be answered, but I do believe there's a lot of things that can be answered. And my hope is to bring those things to the forefront. So I wanted to thank you for being willing and transparent and sharing. And, I know, I'll say this, I'm much more willing to kind of push and even agitate in private than I am in public, because I don't think that's the way to do conversation. So I know that there's been times where I've kind of pushed at your story, and maybe as we go into this, there'll be the need for that. But I want to let you know that that's not really my style. I want to apologize for any time that I've kind of discounted the things you were feeling and the things you were going through. And my hope here is not to try to prove you wrong in your experiences, but rather to highlight that I think we've landed somewhere well, talking about faith. What is a good definition of faith? How can that be proven or disproven? Because again, I think I made the claim that you have faith in what you're saying too, right? Hopefully you're living out, to my definition, is that you believe in something and therefore you're living it out. And I believe you have faith in something. You have faith in the things you have faith in your message. Obviously you wrote a book. You believe you're the unraveler. You have faith in that. So, I'm hoping to challenge that a bit, the things you have faith in, as much as you're going to challenge the things that I have faith in. So again, I thank you for being willing to share. And
just as long as we stay consistent with the original definition of faith that you said, which is essentially confidence in the evidence.
I'll apply it for you. I'll go ahead tonight. I'll do some work in this next week. I'm hoping. I finally bounced over to the comments here, and I saw I think that's Mike Loomis. What a flashback here. He mentioned that I have my work in front of me, and I have every intention. I don't know that I'm here to prove preterism to the folks, or corporate body view, Max Kingism. I'm not here to do that. If we want to put that on the table as a debate, I think
we're both full preterists as far as the interpretation of the Bible is concerned. So we're not here to debate that.
But are you corporate body view CC? I mean, don't do it. Come on now. I'm not here for that unless we put that on the table and we want to do that debate. Let's face it. And this is something that I think the Christian community has done all too wrong. Is the reason why we wanted to do this, and at least my heart, was to get here and talk about some things, go back and review this video, go back and think about what we said here, and then come to the debate table, not going all over the map. So folks are like, why did I waste 2 hours of my time watching these two men? I'm hoping that we'll bring something forth that is of substance, and folks will know why Alan believes that they should become an atheist. Now, I guess we're doing somewhat of a promo for your book. And then also, and I'm hoping that folks, from my vantage point, I don't know that I can prove to you God exists, but what I can prove to you is that there are some that do believe God exists and do believe the things that I believe, that are living it out, are expressing what I've offered up as faith, having true confidence in the message, and are living it out in a tangible way that you can actually see. So that's what I'm hoping to really charge. And dare I speak to my Christian brethren, get involved in a local church. That's the way God's designed for you to make this thing known, not arguing on Facebook chats. So that being said, Alan, thank you very much. I thank you for your time, and I thank you for your journey, and I thank you for the impact you continue to have in my life. And, this has been a blessing to me, and I hope that we will bring some things forth this week in private chat, talking, really hammering things down as far as what we're going to debate.
Yeah, for sure. So in the discussion of does God exist, it sounds to me like we'll make opening statements, but the discussion that from what I would imagine your opening statement is going to be then is demonstrating that the Bible provides sufficient evidence to have confidence in that makes you believe in the existence of God.
Amen. Well,
So,
the Bible and a life well lived, a life lived based on that message, which I've offered up as faith.
well, okay. So you're going to add. Okay, so I'll respond to that then if you're going to add that, because I do think there's problems with using experience as a method by which you can determine anything is true. But that's fine. You can bring that to the table in the debate, and we'll discuss it. So I'm glad you said that, though, because I'll plan on responding to that. But we are not defining faith as the evidence. You are saying that it's confidence based on evidence, and that's what you're going to demonstrate. And that's what I'm looking forward to hearing from you. So you're going to present that a reason to believe the Bible is true, and I'm going to refute that. That's going to be, I think, where we're going to have to go, because it sounds to me like your sole reason for believing God exists is your confidence that the Bible is true.
Yes and no. Obviously, I do. We'll work it out this week, because I do believe there's a necessary, again, biblically, there's belief, there's dead faith, and then there's a faith with works, right? Because again, faith without works is dead. So there are some folks that have faith in things, a willy-nilly faith, that I wouldn't call. I think there's a distinction biblically, at least, that there's a faith with works. And that's what I'm arguing for as that definition of faith there, that the faith isn't just believing in the Bible. The faith is believing in the Bible and putting it into practice and seeing that in my own life, in the lives of other people. And I do. That's where I think experience has to become a part of this, because you're telling me a man that I know and I have a relationship with, we'll use man, a higher being, a higher power, doesn't exist. So there has to be an experience component to it, because that's my experience. I know the person and I have a living relationship with them that you're saying doesn't exist.
I'm not saying he doesn't exist. I'm saying I'd like to know why you think he does. I don't know that he doesn't. I just don't know that he does. I'm an agnostic. I would literally like to have good evidence for why he does. If I had a good reason to believe God existed, I would believe God existed. Whether I like him or not is a different story, but I would still believe he existed. So I would just like to have a good reason, rather than just, we just got to take it on faith. You're saying to me that you have a good reason to believe the Bible is true. So you're not just taking the Bible on faith. You're saying the reason you're taking the Bible on faith is because there's evidence to demonstrate that the Bible is true. That's what I want you to put forward, because that's what I'm not convinced you can do. But I would like to hear it, because if you can, that changes everything. So it sounds to me like that's where we're at.
That sounds like a great debate.
Yeah. So, okay, do you have a few minutes for some Q&A if everybody's here? It's just throwing things out here.
That's cool.
Okay. I don't know that there's much, but just in case there is, I just want to give people a chance.
Some folks said they had questions.
Let's see. I just want to throw this up there because it's a nice comment. Tristan says, Mike is a true Christian and will always have my respect. Nice. I don't know who this was. I think you should tell us what you were going to say. I don't know who this was for or when it was. So I don't know how to respond to that, but I sure wish that somebody would. And Elliot Christopherson says it's Frank Turek, not Ray Comfort. Is that correct? Or are you?
I mean, Frank Turek's known for saying a lot of the same stuff. He does a lot of the atheist Christian debates, but I'm pretty sure, if you're going to quote me on that one, Ray Comfort has a book called, or a movie actually, I guess that's new though, Atheist Delusion. Again, whether it was Ray Comfort, anytime I've ever heard the quote about not having enough faith to be an atheist, it was usually attributed to Ray Comfort, but Frank Turek would go in pretty much the same box as I would put, Ray Comfort for that matter.
Right. Cardinal wins. I agree with you. Faith is an extremely unreliable method for finding truth. However, based on how Mike's defining faith, I would think he would tend to agree with the traditional understanding of faith, where it's belief without evidence, or the way I defined it, that it's a method by which you draw conclusions without justification. It doesn't sound like Mike's agreeing with that definition of faith. He's saying it's a trust or a confidence based on evidence. So that makes this conversation more exciting to me, because he's not going to, I assume, he's not going to, at the end of the day, when he goes to a point where he has to leap to God, he's not going to say, you just have to take it on faith. He's going to provide enough evidence that he's going to say is reliable enough for me to be able to say, hey, I can trust that. I'm confident that God exists because this evidence is definitive. So that's the way we're defining faith for this debate. So
Yeah.
I'm excited about that.
May I respond to that? Thanks, Alan. Sorry to cut you off, but I just wanted to respond to that. So again, I usually leave the analogies to Jesus, but I'm just going to give a quick analogy on the way that I would understand this. So I don't, at least when I started driving, I didn't know how the car worked. And again, you've probably heard this, but it makes sense to me. So I need somebody to show me why it doesn't make sense. I didn't know how cars work. I just was taught you stick the key in the ignition, you turn the ignition, the car starts. Now, that's how it began. Now, what I've learned over time, and I did it, believe it or not, I did it without understanding it. I had faith, if you will use that definition there. I had a belief that if I put the key in the ignition and I turned it, it would start the car. What that's developed into, because I've done it so many times, is faith. That's how I would distinguish the faith from the belief. The belief was, I don't know if it's going to work. It worked. Now it works. I've been doing it again and again and again. And now I've even developed an understanding of how it works. And it still turns the car. And that's where I do believe faith becomes a very reliable method for finding truth. It's how I learned a car starts, is that I began with a belief, put it in the ignition, it started, and now I do it every day. I drive that car. So that's why I do believe it's a good way. Now, again, should it be our sole thing? I hope that's what we're positing we're going to debate is, well, no, I would couple the general idea of faith that, I'm going to put the key in the ignition, which again, I want to hammer that down a bit myself. I'll admit that I'm going to nail down the distinction between faith, belief, and dare I mention dead faith. So yeah, I do believe that faith is a reliable method for finding truth. It's worked on how I learned how to drive a car.
So again, I feel like we're wavering back and forth because your Hebrews 11:1 definition is that faith is the evidence of things unseen. It does not say faith is the evidence of things not seen. But your definition, the one we seem to be agreeing on, is that faith is the evidence of things unseen. In other words, I would like to prefer to use the word confidence in this context because faith is so convoluted by what most people mean by faith, just believing blindly. So essentially, we're agreeing that confidence in evidence is a good way to believe something. That to me is wonderful.
Yes.
Hebrews 11 does not say that. Hebrews 11 says faith is evidence, period. Your faith alone is the evidence of things unseen.
It doesn't say that.
Sure it does. Faith is the evidence of things unseen.
It doesn't say faith alone is the evidence of things not seen.
I mean, what's the word is? I mean, faith is the evidence. It doesn't say faith is the evidence of the evidence. It just faith is the evidence.
My brother is
all elsewhere talks about faith alone. So, I mean,
right. Well, we could do that. We could do that discussion because I guess I wouldn't use because I would say my brother is a family member. That doesn't mean he's the only family member. The is doesn't make it an only thing. It's that, yeah, my brother's my family member. I have other family members. So when I say faith is the evidence, I'm not saying
no. Which again, your brother is the only brother of that brother. That's the only
family member. He's a family member. And in this sense, it's saying faith is the evidence. It's not saying. I don't understand the verse to be saying faith is the only evidence to things that are not seen.
But you didn't say my brother is the family member. You said my brother is a family member. Hebrews 11:1 does not say faith is an evidence. It says faith is the evidence.
Oh, well, arguing with an agnostic about the definition of faith, that's an interesting we could do that.
Like I said, there are two definitions of faith that typically get used. One is confidence. I like that one because to me it's based on evidence. The other one is faith by itself because it is the evidence. And that stands alone and has no evidence to base it on. It's just I believe because faith tells me so. That's what I'm opposed to. And it sounded to me like you're saying we're not going to use that one. You're going to use the one that bases its confidence on evidence. That's what I'm excited about because it sounds to me like you actually, unlike any Christian I've talked to, is going to be able to provide evidence that's going to demonstrate the existence of God so that I can have confidence in it, rather than just saying you just have to have faith to believe it.
Evidence that the Bible is true.
Yeah, that's fine. If you can give me evidence, that's a good way to go about it. If you can give me the evidence that demonstrates the Bible is true definitively, sure, that'd be great. So that's a good way to go about it. But that's not faith alone then. That's not faith is the evidence. That's faith, that's confidence in the evidence. Big difference from Hebrews 11:1.
I see your point, and I agree with the way you're phrasing that. I guess I have a third component, I guess, to the understanding of faith, that I believe faith with works is the faith that Hebrews 11 is speaking about. It's not speaking about the other version of faith, which is a faith that is faith, but it's faith without works. Which
I have no problem with the faith with works. That doesn't change what I'm saying at all. The works aspect, that's just a demonstration that the faith that is the evidence does something, but that doesn't change the fact that faith alone is the evidence, period.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't know that component helps the conversation a bit. But again, I just hope we're not going to switch back. That's why I wanted to nail down what you were defining faith as, because I don't want to be flipping back and forth. If we're going to talk about faith meaning confidence in evidence, I'm great with that. If we're going to talk about faith being the evidence in itself, that's a whole different story. But I think you're going to have a hard time demonstrating any evidence out of that.
You're not going to you just have to have faith from me.
Okay, that's perfect. Then we are good to go. I'm excited about that. All right, cool. We can move on then. Let's see. What kind of questions? I don't know if we have any more. I know we had a question here. Somebody literally asked, can I ask a question? I mean, sure. That's what we're doing right now. So please just throw it in the chat.
Yes, Ryan King had mentioned he had some questions.
Yeah. This is a good point. Learning Lily says, we just want to live, but we can't stop thinking about this stuff no matter how hard we try. It's a valid point.
Thank God. Thank God.
It is true. Let's see. Ryan King yelled, Alan. I don't know. I agree, Michael. Is there a question? Okay, I have two questions. Oh, this is nice. Thanks for sharing, Alan. You're appreciated. Appreciate that, Edward Howell. Thank you very much. That means a lot.
Shout out to Blue Point. Edward Howell's a member at Blue Point Bible Church. So
that's nice.
Our church. You are appreciated, Alan.
Thank you, and I appreciate you. This is a good moment. Let's see. Alan, do you believe in objective morality? Oh boy, that's a question for a whole conversation. Yes and no. It's the best I can answer right now, because I've done a lot on this already. And who knows, it might even come up in this discussion, because that typically does. But yes and no. I'll just leave it at that.
To Frank Turek.
What's that?
I leave those debates to Frank Turek.
I mean, I don't mind debating it. It's just at 8:03, it's a little late to get into it. I would require a whole nother rant that was probably as long as my testimony, so we don't need to do that. But that was one question. He said he had another, so I guess I'm waiting on it if he wants to throw it up there. In the meantime, I'll throw these two up here. Edward Howell says, conciseness, existence, and working extremities is extremely, incredibly amazing. Okay, cool. And faith is evidence, things hoped for and not see. However, you must count the cost, walking as if it's already achieved. All right. And thanks for that answer. Okay, so I guess there wasn't a second question, so that's cool. I don't see it up here. So, all right. Oh, this one's great. Hang on. We got to end on this one. Kerry Burks, two of my favorite guys. Yeah, that's the way to do it right there, man. Thank you, Kerry. It's good to see you again. It's been a while, man. I'm glad to see you. It's glad to see you in this chat. This is fun. All right, so let's pop this up here for a second. Oops, sorry. Let me get rid of the. Oh man, of course, I get rid of this now. There we go. Sorry about that. All right, so May 23rd is was that a Saturday night, Mike? I can't remember. I think it is. Yeah, Saturday night.
Saturday night. Okay, great.
May 23rd and 24th, Sunday and Monday. I'm sorry, Saturday and Sunday at 6 p.m., 23rd and 24th. Mike and I are going to hit the floor. So we're going to bring our openings and our closings and then hash it out, have more respectful conversation like we did tonight. So it'll be a good dialogue. We'll have a great time. I can't tell you how excited I am about this, because I feel like he's going to bring something nobody else has so far. So this is great. And then the 26th on Tuesday, assuming we don't feel like we need more time, we are going to do our closing thoughts on the conversation. So, all right, Mike, any final thoughts for everybody and myself? Anything?
If I may just, I'll say a response to the question that I saw there. Do I believe Jesus is divine? Yes, I do. I believe Jesus is the image of the invisible God. Absolutely. And Alan, I appreciate your time tonight. I appreciate all those that are still watching with us 2 hours in. I want to let you know that my mind and my heart, as I know it is yours, Alan, is that we're really going to hammer down some points this week in our communication. And those of you that are viewing this tonight, you're saying, oh, well, I don't know that, what to think right now. That's exactly where we want you. We want you to say, I'm kind of questioning this myself. And again, I'm open to that. I want you to question where you're at, why you believe that. Obviously, one of my charges I made to Alan before was that when he was a Christian, I don't know that he was asking a lot of questions, the right questions. Christians ask questions. That's what we need to be doing. We need to be doing this more and having conversations with folks. And, but again, I did want to just remind the audience that my hope this week would be that we actually hammered things down, and actually come to the table next week with, a debate where we're going to, you're going to leave that debate saying, oh, well, I know why I would believe this or why I wouldn't believe this. And that's, my hope as we continue forward. I don't want folks to think that we're endeavoring just to get up here and posture ourselves and waste their night. That is not the goal at all.
I couldn't agree more, except for the part about me not questioning, but that's okay. We'll leave that for another time. But yes, I agree with everything else. We are not here to just posture. We both genuinely care about this and about people, which is why we're doing what we're doing. Right. And I appreciate you saying that, Mike, because I can't tell you how I get so frustrated with Christians who just think I want to do nothing but eat babies. And that's my whole life now because I have no morals and no value and don't care about anything in this world. That's just not true. I have a reason for this. I genuinely care about people. And I feel like you're trapped in something. And obviously you don't think that, but I do, and vice versa. So that's what we're here to talk about. So this is awesome. Mike, if you want to stick around after the show, we'll talk again behind scenes. It's about a minute outro, so just hang back. Everybody, thank you so much for being a part of the Raveler and Mike's conversation tonight. Remember, your freedom is one unravelation away. See you next time.